Our next stand-up Diva center that we're going to be talking about, and that's Nova. We are going to be going over Nova, who's my favorite current choice for for the meta in general. But it is a little bit of a complicated deck, and it requires a little bit of thinking in order to know exactly what you want to be doing with it. So I should give you a fair warning that this deck seems to have a simple idea behind it, but in practice is actually quite difficult because you're going to be going into long, grindy games. Nova Skyfeather, in essence, if we look at what Nova Skyfeather does, more or less says that she's going to constantly be recurring guards into your hand, and with that you get the you turn off the clock of the opponent's Lrigs, so you're going to be extending these games into turn 8 games at times. But that means that you have a lot less room for maneuvering because one small move can snowball you into losing that game. You have to create long-term plans with this deck. And as such, we're using sort of the normal package of Tamago and Bang assists here. Bang da Capo, Bang Crescendo. Bang Crescendo will give you a little bit of early endgame to play around with, which this deck desperately needs. Double Strike allows you to get yourself a draws, which this deck also does not have in spades, is card draw. So one of its weaknesses, for example, is getting discarded out. Even though you are a long game deck, you no longer have a hand to really work with. Tamago Jetstick can also refill your hand, again, needed in this deck. As well as giving you the ability to down something on the opponent's field, and Bang da Capo allows you to prevent a bunch of damage, and you're good with that types of stuff, because again, you're going super long game, so you need the ability to do that. If you look at our enter costs of things here, we have actually quite a standard enter costs of things. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, so over the number of green enter that we need, like a bare 6 amount in order to pull off Bang da Capo, and that's because we're using Demeter here. And then also we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, which is the number required in order to pull off some of our blue stuff regularly, which is going to be mostly just random draining. But let's just get straight into it. We've also going to do the Hampai Destruction. This is just mostly a discard 3 in this deck. It's not like you're going to continuously keeping their hand down, but discard 3 helps you get rid of their hand and lower the amount of options that they can do going into the mid game where you're really going to shine. Plus, it just sort of is the death axe against aggro decks, because while you're walling up, and that's what you're going to be doing a lot in this deck, is just walling up, you can also get yourself a good discard effect to stop them from being able to pressure you any extra. But like I said, the deck does run out of gas quite easily, especially if the opponent's making you discard. So the drawing 3 cards also is a very good option here. Now your last team piece is sort of up to you. I'm choosing to use End the Turn here, but you could also use Xenocluster. You could also use Chime the Blessed Key. Song of Wixoss is another one that you could use. You have options to go for if you think you'd rather go down some different options for your other piece. This is a flexible one where you've got the piece. Going into the main deck, let's talk about what the core of the deck is. And it's all new cards, mind you. You have Typo. You have Ishi Kirimaru. And then you have Komi Blessed General Queen. These are going to be the core of your deck. And they have something very much in common, which is they wall against the opponent incredibly well. They make it very difficult to punch through and damage you. Let's just go over them one by one. Typo. Typo allows you to, on your opponent's turn, have this 3,000 be a 7,000. That's important because it dodges Lancelot, it dodges Ramel, it dodges a lot of negative effects, and it dodges a lot of common red removal. It doesn't dodge everything, but it dodges quite a bit, and it's a very low bar to hit. You just need a level 1 Signy in your enter zone, and you can really play around that quite easily, because often you're saving your green enter for your late game, and if you look at what we have as our level 1. Triumph here is our level 1, allowing us to pretty easily have a Triumph in the Enter Zone at all points and times. Its Life Burst is also very good for a stalling wall deck, which is target Signy on your opponent's field gains. The Signy can't attack till end of turn, you draw a card. So at worst you draw a card, but at best you get hit once, maybe twice, and then before the third Signy can attack, or the second Signy attack, you just go, nope, can't attack no more. The next one is the Hajimari, High Armed. Now this actually, you might be surprised, but all parts of this card is pretty incredible. This is one of those cards that you're going to want to continue to hold on to for sets to come. It has got a constant during your opponent's turn. For no work whatsoever, this is a 12,000 power. Generally speaking, unless you're a deck that cares about power, like red-green decks are, power doesn't matter on your turn. Yes, it does in order to vanish stuff, but vanishing stuff doesn't help you get damage unless you have Lancer, so it doesn't really matter. If there's an open lane and you put a card in it, it will get damage regardless of its power. So the fact that this grows on the opponent's turn is really no sweat off of your back. In fact, that's when it really matters. The power is more of a defensive measure against, especially in this deck. The auto once a turn ability, which is whenever, and I want to mention it's an auto once a turn, which means that if, for example, you hit a ability like its Life Burst ability is, and you put something into play on your opponent's turn, it will also trigger this ability, which is that whenever a Signy enters your field, you can look at the top card of your library. If you want to bottom that card, you can. It's just some amount of filtering. It's strange how often it comes up and is needed, but you should know that when you're sequencing your plays, you probably should put the Ishi first thing down on the field, and then you should put some other stuff in there. Its Life Burst, like I said, is look at the top 3 cards of your library, put a Signy from among them into your hand or onto the field, and put the rest in any order. This is good. It's just a good ability because it will help lane clutter, and it's better than, for example, Haniel, because Haniel's a level 1 and you don't necessarily want to shuffle it away, but level 2s you do want to shuffle away, so this Life Burst will come up more often because of it. The last one is Komi. Now, Komi Blessed General is also one of these that we're going to be talking about for a long time to come. As long as you're playing a white center Lrig and I should actually clarify. As long as you're playing a white center Lrig, you're probably going to want to use Komi, because Komi's ability, again, you probably want that green that green Lrig, but you might even be willing to Dream Team green into the white deck just to be able to use this card. Basically says that on your attacks you can make your Nova attack twice. It's got other things in there, of course, but the other thing is the only thing you really got to pay is, aside from the enter, you have to down 2 Signy on your field. But the upside of that is you're probably also trying to enter starve them. So you don't really care that you're attacking their Signy and vanishing it. You don't care that you're not opening up a lane. This is an alternate way to open up a lane. It's a great way for Nova to have an actual clock in this game. And it's also pretty sticky. It's hard to get rid of if you have early enter, especially if you're, again, being a wall deck and the opponent is really trying to aggro you down. Then it doesn't matter. You can go ahead and put this from your enter zone back into play and refill that lane up. It's very good in a wall stall deck, and that's what this deck really is. Moving along to our other cards, we have Xiaoyun. Again, it's a sticky card that walls pretty well because it chumps pretty well because it can't get killed by Lancelot very easily. And then you got Triumph here, and that's sort of to balance out colors, as well as to be just typo fodder here. Moving into our Servant, which actually, this is the first time I'm actually going to delve into Servant on a deck tech instead of just being like, Servant Sharp's always a staple and is very good. This is one of the times that you actually need to be thinking about how do you use your Servants in this deck, because you can use them in multiple ways. If you do not mind, or you have extra Servants in hand, you can play Servants as field clutter in this deck. You can put them down as chump blockers. And the reason why is Nova Skyfeather will inevitably want to see a servant in your trash to bring back to your hand. If you've got 2 servants in hand, and that's a thing to think about, you can do things like discard your servant so you can keep your other stuff, and also still be able to guard that turn and to bring back a guard. You can actually intercharge your servant in this deck because you know that it'll be used for multicolors, and then as soon as it's back into your trash, you can bring it back to your hand. So you've got a multitude of ways to use Servant Sharp in this deck that you do not necessarily have the flexibility to do that. I mean, you have the flexibility to do it in the other decks, but it always kind of feels bad. It doesn't actually feel terrible for Nova. Then we're running a full set of Folklores. Again, this is to do a certain requirement for blues here, and we'll get into that with Demeter in a second. But Folklore's got an incredible ability down to Signies on your opponent's field and draw a card. And then we have the last one here in our level 2 slot, which is just to get a little bit more enter. That is Churn, Natural Plant. If this is in your center, the Signy zone, you get to enter charge 1. Sometimes you just use this to enter charge 1. You sacrifice it immediately afterwards with a Ishi. That's usually the play that you do. But you can always just go, yeah, I really don't care. This is a chump blocker. You can get rid of it. I need the green anyways. And you can attack with it if you really want to in an open lane. Sometimes you do that on turn 3 with Nova Skyfeather being able to pop a Signy back to the opponent's hand. And you're like, all right, cool, I've got an opening. I'll go ahead and use this for it. Sometimes it's just fodder to down with this kind of a thing. Then we've got Fenrir. Fenrir is just a fantastic thing. Freezes, that allows you to stall, allows you to enter, starve a little bit more efficiently. But the important part is it makes the opponent discard every turn, which is quite fantastic. And then we have Demeter. And Demeter is interesting. Demeter is a green card that has Harmony 1 blue Lrig. So the fun fact about this, you actually can play Komi and then a Demeter in the same turn. It's totally okay. Komi's going to tap down your green Lrig. Demeter's going to tap down your blue Lrig. It plays nicely together. You have the auto, which is at the beginning of your attack phase, if there are 3 or more colors among Signy on your field, then you can target one other Signy and you can pay a green and anything. If you do, it gains Lancer. Of course, also during your turn, whenever one of your Signy is vanished, you get to enter charge 1. The cool thing is you're going to put that on a different Signy, so if they vanish the Signy with Lancer, great, you just intercharged. Sweet. You can use its effect probably next turn because it probably is sticking around because it's got a big power. This is interesting that Demeter works better in non-green decks than it does in green decks. In green decks, you have a lot of green cards, so you've got to play around Demeter's ability to put Rainbow out there and then be able to give Lancer. With this deck, because realistically, you are only ever really playing, this is your only liability. You're playing Demeter and 1 Fenrir, Demeter and a Komi. You're playing Demeter and a Komi and, I don't know, a Folklore, right? Or you're playing Demeter and a Fenrir and an Ishi. You are almost always going to be able to get Lancer off. And it plays incredibly nicely with Komi, because Komi needs to down 2 Signy on your field, which means that if the lane is completely blocked, right, you have a blocked lane, blocked lane, blocked lane, Komi, you can give something Lancer, maybe Komi, for example, and you can Lancer through a lane and then leave the other 2 completely open, still use Komi's ability to tap down your other 2, and then get the extra attack in with Nova. It's important to note that Komi erases abilities of Lrigs, so you're not going to get any extra attack effects off of Nova. But that's generally speaking how you're going to play it. You also got Random Drain. It's just an incredible card. It's better in Uchu because you can make them randomly discard. You can just draw cards. The thing to be wary of is you're not a dedicated discard deck. So if you're going to Random Drain, you might want to unload like in 1 turn in case they have Xenocluster. It really does hurt to get Xenoclustered if you go Random Drain on turn 2, alright cool, move to it, and then they just draw 3 cards. That really does hurt. You might want to pair Random Drain with the Hand Pie or Random Drain with the Fenrir to make it so it hurts a little bit less. if they do Xenocluster, but it's too good of a card to pass up in this deck. Overall, this deck is going to perform pretty stellar against aggro decks and not so stellar against other decks. It has a very strong matchup against aggro decks, but before you go and take this and think, oh yeah, I'm going to play this at the ceremony, I've got this one, woohoo, No Limit's going down. Yes, it wrecks No Limit. That is a pure fact. However, against mid-range decks like Madoka that make them discard, or tempo decks like Ray, or Musica decks that are like able to do a vast amount of Lancer and or power draining effects, this deck is not super great. So before you just shuffle up a Nova, you need to know its weaknesses. It doesn't fare well against a lot of the metagame. It does have one diversely strong matchup, but going into it, you should know that the matchups are not super, super, super in your favor outside of that. So with that in mind, guys, I hope you enjoyed Nova. And I also would think if you guys want, you can subscribe, comment if you guys have any other ideas. If you're trying some other types of Nova, I would love to hear your tech on it. Again, it's my favorite deck in the meta currently. So tell me what you guys think. And as always, may you always flip a life burst.